there's something about Trump. There's a dark side and there's some magic there. And what I'm trying to do is just harness the magic. To me, Donald Trump is sort of a cross between Jesse Helms, Ronald Reagan, and P.T. Barnum. I mean, it's just this bigger than life deal. He could make the Republican Party something that nobody else I know could make it. It could make it bigger. He could make it stronger. He could make it more diverse. And he also could destroy it.
Let's harness that magic, shall we? While the former president continues to push the big lie, Republican lawmakers in Georgia, for one, are forging ahead with efforts to make it harder to vote. State Senate passed a bill today eliminating what's called no excuse early voting. Atlanta Journal-Constitution sums it up this way. The legislation would reduce the availability of absentee voting, restricting it to those who are at least 65, have a physical disability, or are out of town. In addition, Georgians would need to provide, wait for it, a driver's license number, state ID number, or other identification. Bill heads to the House next, where it's expected to pass. Back tonight, two of our returning favorites, Jason Johnson, campaign veteran, journalist, contributor at the Griot, and a professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State, and David Jolly, former Republican, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He's now chairman of Serve America Movement, a group of current and former Democrats, Republicans, and independents working to fix our nation's sorry, broken politics, and in their work, we wish them luck. Okay, Congressman, we heard Lindsey Graham. I'm going to play for you Meghan McCain from today, then we can discuss.
Well, I love Lindsey Graham, and he's as much a member of my family almost as my children are. So, but with that said, I disagree for this reason. Right now, there's too much anger and hate, and that's been generated from the top. And I just don't believe that our party can survive by appealing to the dark side of humanity.
Forgive me, the senator's widow, Cindy McCain, and not Meghan. Congressman, this is a question people have danced around, but people have asked it for years now. What happened to Lindsey Graham?
Cindy McCain's probably more gracious than I would be in this moment, Brian. I think Lindsey Graham in many ways is the gift that keeps on giving, but if it wasn't so serious in terms of its reflection on today's politics and Republican politics. Look, for Lindsey Graham, who is not an ignorant person, to suggest that the way to create greater diversity in today's Republican Party is for Donald Trump to harness the legacy of Jesse Helms, suggests that maybe Lindsey Graham is the greater P.T. Barnum in this story than Donald Trump himself is. And I think we know that about Lindsey Graham. He has changed directions and changed his own behavior and his own convictions as the wind has changed as well. And I guess the most instructive thing in that Lindsey Graham interview, and I think it's instructive of the entire Republican Party in this moment, is that he cares not about the Republican principles, right, about the ideology, the conservatism that once drew Lindsey Graham to the party. He instead cares about the man that can keep the party in power or bring the party back to power. It doesn't matter what that looks like. If it's Ronald Reagan or P.T. Barnum or Jesse Helms, Lindsey Graham wants power, just like Donald Trump does.
Dr. Johnson, now let's talk about the serious politics going on in states like Georgia. Some of these states are so into being bold and on brand. I expect one of them to label it the Voter Suppression Act of 2021. They're being that public about it. For 15 years in Georgia, you didn't need an excuse to get an absentee ballot. There's also a measure that would ban the giveaway of snacks and liquids to those in line to vote. Jason, what do you do about this coming flood of straight-up voter suppression?
Well, first off, Brian, we have to identify it for what it is. This is black voter suppression. Like, it is very specifically targeted at black and brown people. Whenever you're talking about people can't vote because of certain identification. Whenever you're talking about getting rid of absentee voting, something that Republicans had actually put into law, and now they're taking out of law because they don't like the results, they're trying to stop black people, brown people, Hispanic people, and Native American people from actually being able to participate in the process. Georgia just happens to be the most blatant because you have the New Georgia Project and Haleo and Stacey Abrams there, but you see the same things happening in North Carolina, you see the same sort of things happening in Arizona. Here's what actually concerns me, Brian, honestly, about this. People are going to sue. ACLU will sue, New Georgia Project will sue, organizations will sue. But what we have seen, we saw this in 2018, is that a state legislature can move faster than the courts. And so even if they sue to block what's being passed right now by the legislature, because we know Brian Kemp is going to sign it, he's a coward, he's going to do it eventually, they will just come up with something else. And we've seen a tendency in courts, especially these new Trump-appointed judges, that even if they admit, oh, yeah, this is voter suppression, this is racially discriminatory, this is an undue burden on voters, but you know what? We're so close to the election, there's no time to fix it. So that's where I think this new Justice Department, Kimberly Clark, Vinita Gupta, like the people that are being put into the Justice Department right now by Joe Biden have to be aggressive about this because Republicans aren't going to stop.
I see these barricades coming up. I think maybe the system thinks that there isn't going to be justice and that there isn't going to be peace, and they know it already, like the verdict is set.
The trial is going to be traumatic for black people here and black people across the country. That reminder that these things are still happening to us.
Let's talk about this. Jury selection was delayed today in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin after a dispute over adding a third-degree murder charge. He's currently facing manslaughter and murder 2 second-degree charges in the death of George Floyd. The judge said jury selection would begin tomorrow morning unless an appeals court intervenes in this. Remaining with us are Professor David Johnson and former Congressman Professor Jason Johnson and former Congressman David Jolly. Professor, no one needs to tell you, because you teach impressionable minds for a living, police trials are rare. Police convictions are more rare than that. We just marked 30 years since Rodney King, which is hard to believe. Absent video, would we ever have known? Absent video, would we ever have known? But the question to you is, are we any closer to a conviction, do you think, in this case, given where we are as a society in 2021?
So, Brian, I'm generally a realist about this. Cops almost never get convicted for anything, although it's interesting. You look at Minnesota. This is the place where the Somali police officer was convicted for shooting a white Australian woman about a year and a half ago. So clearly justice applies itself very sporadically and inconsistently, depending on the race of the victim and the race of the person who's accused of taking their life. Here's what I look at in this particular case, though. One, this delay is really key because the prosecutors want to use the same charge used against the Somalian police officer. I think his last name was Noom. They want to use the same charge that we used against that officer to get a conviction to use against Derek Chauvin. So this is a very important delay because the prosecution is basically like, you're not going to send us into this case with one hand tied behind our back. I would have trouble seeing, and I am not an optimist by any stretch of the imagination, but I think sometimes there are police crimes that are so heinous that, as racist as I think our criminal justice system is, there is a fear that if this person gets off, it's no holds barred. And I remember that with Daniel Holtzclaw in Oklahoma, the gentleman who was accused of sexually assaulting women as a police officer. He was actually convicted. There was a lot of skepticism. I just don't think Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd in front of the entire world, will be able to get off scot-free. I don't think this country could handle that, and I don't think this jury would want to see the consequences of letting him off.
David Jolly, back to politics we must go. We learned today there's going to be another vacancy in the U.S. Senate. Roy Blunt, Missouri, who, when he goes home, will no doubt try to fuzz up and buff up his reputation and be the distinguished senator again. But people should know he became, over the course of the last couple of years, a full-on Trumper by any other name. His voting record with Donald Trump was 90.6%. And here we have Donald Trump writing this fundraising letter under his new PAC stationary letterhead, saying, not just in effect, but pretty much straight up, don't give money to these guys. Give your money to me. David, how's all this going to go over?
First of all, Roy Blunt will probably stay in Washington, D.C. and become a lobbyist, not go home to Missouri, would be my guess. But, you know, it's ironic. Just a day ago, Donald Trump wrote this letter to the RNC, the NRCC, and others saying you can't use my likeness. Today, they actually pushed back and said, we're still going to use your likeness. And now Donald Trump saying, OK, well, then I'm going to tell Republican voters to give money to me, not to the party. I think the lesson is clear that Donald Trump is always in this for himself and to line his own pockets. But I think it's also indicative of what we will see from Donald Trump going forward. He will make his money now in international business because his domestic business brand is really lower than it's ever been as a result of his political service. But within politics, he will grift and make a ton of money in domestic politics, and he will be successful converting over Republican donors to Trump donors. And look, that is the Trump brand. This is about Donald Trump. It has been since he entered politics. It will be now that he's left the presidency.
Professor, a final question for you. It still rings in my ears talking about the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department. What's the level in your college classes of optimism, pessimism, people who think bright days are in front of us?
I'll tell you this, Brian, candidly, with a group of students who were 18, 19 years old, Trayvon Martin was killed when they were like 13. They don't have a lot of faith in this country. They've seen nothing but black people getting murdered and massacred by cops and by random individuals for the last 7 or 8 years of their life. They don't believe in this place, and they don't really have much reason to. One of my greatest challenges as faculty is to tell them that this system is worth fighting for and that it can possibly be changed, because no evidence has been presented that it actually works. If your lifetime has been spent watching black people get killed in viral videos for the last 7, 8 years of your existence, followed by a man like Donald Trump getting elected, you don't believe much in the American dream right now.
All I know is your students are lucky to be in your class. Dr. Jason Johnson, Congressman David Jolly. Gentlemen, thank you both very much.